Right then, well, I'm here today with someone who's had quite an incredible journey. There's lots of little tangents we could go on to talk about a wide variety of elements of your life and of those around you, but we're going to focus on yourself. So we are speaking with Jennifer Stirling. Jennifer, it's been delightful just speaking with you before pressing recording and kind of getting to know you and listening and things. So how are you doing, basically?
I'm doing great. We were talking about the baby goats I just helped with. And my new baby. So I've got babies everywhere. And life is busy and full and beautiful. My son's doing club soccer all week, every week. So I'm going to all those games. It's good life. I'm really appreciative of being here and in the place I am right now. Honestly, like I'm happily married. I have great kids. We just bought our house. So in a very, very, very good place.
That's amazing. I've not even been in the house I'm living in now for a year. I got that in May, and then we spent like 3 months stripping wallpaper off, getting rid of floorboards that were soaked with cat urine, which was good fun and smelt horrendous. Yeah. So replacing lots of stuff in this house, but we've been settled in for a little while now. So I'm in the sympathetic camp of that when it comes to home ownership, because it's a pain trying to get a house and all the rigmarole that one has to go through. And then when you finally have it, it's like, great, I've got the house. Now I need to change this and this and this. So, all hats off to you. But one of the reasons sort of we end up speaking in things, or one of the kind of things you put forward for us when we were communicating via email, was something about you, which was your mental health journey, which is something that you've been very open about and you've spoken about on other podcasts. But I want to sort of delve into, because I think that your journey is very interesting, and everyone's mental health journey is completely different. Even if there are similar threads and things, everyone experiences it differently. Everyone deals with it in lots of different ways. And I really liked your perspective of it. So I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about, obviously you said in previous podcasts that you've had chronic debilitating depression, which according to doctors was genetic, which I know is something that's quite a controversial thing outside of just this conversation. And I've had many conversations with my friends disagreeing with that idea. I think that there can be people who may have mental health issues, which are obviously genetic and things, including depression. But there are a large amount of cases where I feel as if doctors are diagnosing people with that because it's kind of an easy way out in a lot of ways. So I wonder if you could give us, as someone who's specifically been through that and knows a lot more about it than I do, how your kind of mental health journey, sort of how it affected you as a child and kind of how you came out the other side. And we'll just, no explicit chronological order, and I'll dip in and out, but just please tell us.
Absolutely. So when we said chronic debilitating genetic depression, it's kind of like in quotations, like That's what they like to say. I don't believe it either. I think that there's definitely things that can be passed down to us through our genes, through our ancestors, through behaviors of our parents, which then we're living those things out. But there comes a point where you have to start blaming your past or your genes and start taking ownership and doing something about it. And I can tell you, I tried everything under the sun to try not to be depressed, and was raised very religiously, was taught that this is the plan of happiness. And if you do these things, you'll be happy. And despite all of my efforts to do all the right things, I was not. And it didn't seem to matter what I did. And I circumvented the whole drug, alcohol, free sex, all those things that people often go to when they're depressed, because I believed in a higher power. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do those things. But even doing the right things wasn't bringing me that joy that I could see was out there. Like I could see other people who I admired that were not struggling like me. And I wondered how they did it or why. But I also knew that I was taught in church that God can heal us. And so I think there was just that piece of me that refused to give up all those years, because I thought, well, if I just try a little harder, if I just do a little more, if I do these things, or, someday. And then eventually I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, maybe when I'm dead, he'll heal me. Like if I just live a good life, then he'll reward me with happiness after that. But a part of me even wasn't willing to believe it, even after the doctor said, well, this is just you for the rest of your life. Sorry. When my parents, don't know what else to do for you. Sorry. And nothing that I was doing seemed to have any effect. I started the Prozac journey about 15 years old, and it took the edge off of the anger and depression that I struggled with so much. So I thought, well, I could live life and tolerate it like this. But of course, it comes with side effects. And I also know from experience and talking to other people that not only did it make me tired, but it made it harder to connect and maintain healthy connections with people. Those chemicals, just like, you kind of need them. And the problem was, before that, I couldn't connect either because I was so angry. So it was just like the better of the two at the time, until I was about 25 and I had a conversation with my mom over the phone. And she was just like, oh, heads up, I just went to my doctor, because she took Prozac too. And she said, I asked him about the long-term side effects, and he told me that they're now finding that people who take this long-term kind of just turn into couch potatoes and they don't want to do anything. Mm-hmm. And that to me was like worse than death. Like, I couldn't even accept that reality of future. If I'm like, if that's the reality of this, I can't take this anymore. And what is that going to do to me? I'm going to turn into a monster again. So like, I just felt like caught in a tough place. Like, I can't, I like, because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like, what do I do? And I literally threw up my arms and I was like, you know what? Gosh dang it, God, you made me. You know how to fix me, so do it. And it wasn't a nice, oh, please help me. It was, oh no, now, like, I'm done. And it was like that point where I was like, I give up and I'm not trying anymore. Like, you're going to fix me. And it was like this surrendering moment where I also decided. And something I learned later about the word decide is that when you decide something, you're literally cutting off all other options. So there was only one option for me, and it was, I'm going to heal. And that's when everything started to change. Long story short, I started very quickly, thought I'd tried everything, right? And you hear that all the time. Oh, I've tried everything. If you haven't been healed, you haven't tried everything, because there's something out there that will work for you, and it's different for everybody. But for me, it was fish. And I didn't even realize it at the time. I just did it as kind of a health, trial. Like, oh, this sounds healthy. I'll eat fish 3 days a week. 3 months down the road, forgot to go get my prescription. It was 5 days after I should have gotten it. And by day 3, I would have been a mess. It was day 5. And as I was getting ready to go get the prescription, I realized I was fine. Not only fine, but like that I wasn't tired. I felt better than I had ever in probably my entire life, because my life up to that point was literally wake up in the morning, like, new day. Okay. And then my cereal bowl would spill and the day was ruined. It was like, it just never was okay. I was always stressed. Everything ticked me off. If you would like hit me on accident, I'd be like, oh, I want to hit him. Like, it was just constantly like that. So to feel this kind of calm and peace and just being okay, because I was always mediocre or bad. If I ever saw like happy, it was because I was at Disneyland and I got on the ride really quickly, like it was very short and sweet, and then it was over. So I recognized that this was working, and I cried because I couldn't believe it. Like, I really didn't believe it would help me. And so at that point, when I realized that fish could do that, I was like, okay, what more can I do? Like, I want to know everything. And so I never went back and refilled another prescription for that ever again. And I learned everything I could about natural healing, natural everything. I started using herbs. It was trial and error and sometimes very stressful because I didn't know what I was doing. Treated my kids like the guinea pigs. Here, try this. Let's see if that works for your cold. Usually would try it first on myself and then help the kids. But now it's just a part of my life. It's just how I operate. I eat very, very little sugar. It took me about 10 years before I stopped craving it. It should tell you how addictive it is. But when I got off of sugar, I literally went through withdrawals. It was hard. So the fish was like the big aha. And then after that, it was like it's kind of like the guy in The Emperor's New Groove, the old man who would like be like, I'm free. And then he'd fall into a hole and be like, dang it. Like, that's kind of how the journey was after that. Like, I'm like, I'm free. And then I would hit a wall and go, oh, shoot, there's more to do. It's just like layers and layers and layers to work through. But that's the beauty of the body and the spirit. I think that it can, for me, it would give me this respite. And then it was like, okay, time for the next step. The next step for me was I got terribly sick, really sick, so sick that it was the same thing my grandmother had, but I knew if I went the route she did, which was go to doctors, I'd end up just like her. And so I looked at what it would take to do it naturally, and I sobbed because I was like, I'm going to have to change everything. Oh, this is going to be hard. And I couldn't eat anything I wanted. And at the time, it was just like, oh, this is disgusting. I hate, quinoa, gross. But now, again, like it's what my body literally craves and wants. So you can actually change who you are on a fundamental level, what your body wants, what you want, who you are. And I think keeping that perspective, even if it's just 10 years in the future. Now, for me, because I have such a religious mindset and a spiritual mindset, I'm thinking like eternity. Mm-hmm. And, like even if this life is really, really, really bad for me and I struggle, like it's an experience, I can learn from it. And that alone makes me feel a sense of joy. So even when my life feels like it's falling apart and, oh, this is rough. Like there's been days when it was so bad, like the day my my second husband, because I've been married 2 other times before I found like a happy marriage. The day he left, he just walked out and devastated, absolutely devastated. And my kids were sitting there, and it was my oldest son. I think he was 10 at the time. And he said, gosh, today was the same day of Hurricane Harvey. And my first husband, he'd just taken me to court and I lost half the time with them. So we now had to share. And that had come through that day as well. Oof. So my son, so I'm losing my kids and my husband, and I'm just sitting there going, ah. And my son starts laughing. He goes, today's a really bad day. And we just all started laughing. He's like, what do you do? Like, get up and keep going. And I mean, I didn't like bounce back that day. It took me a good 3 months of mourning, that loss. But I decided, okay, I'm going to give myself, like I think I got to month 2 and I was like, I'm going to give myself 1 more month and then I'm going to move on. 1 more month to be kind of sad and depressed and just work this through my system. And then I'm done. So I worked really hard. I talked to people. I got life coach and would go running. And I joined a little adult soccer league just to keep myself doing something busy. And 3 months and I was like, okay, let's do this, moving on.
Incredible.
And started dating again. So.
And then you found, the perfect man, which I've heard from, I think it was on the Happy and Single podcast? I think that was around the time, but you had been married at that point, I think, when you went on that podcast and things. So you were talking about.
He's wonderful. Is he perfect? No, but he's my person. He's my other half, and I think the difference that it made was that I came whole and he came whole, and no one's 100% whole, but closer than I've ever been. So that you're not needing the person to be happy; they just add to that happiness, and then it's like a helpmeet, someone that you're giving, they're giving, you're all givers instead of one taking and you feeling drained or the other way around. But having 2 people who are equally yoked, as we like to say it, 2 oxen, you're pulling together, not just like one oxen that's like, I don't feel like it today. And then you're pulling both of you, and oxen are heavy. So
I also love your reference to The Emperor's New Groove, because that is a criminally underrated movie.
Oh my gosh.
It's so good. I love it so much. We're actually, I've got there's a podcast mini series I do with a couple friends of mine. It's called Disney Discussions, where you watch Disney movies of a certain theme, and it's my pick next. And I've gone underrated animated Disney movies is what we're choosing. It's like Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, and Treasure Planet. And I was like, the other 2, they're fine, but it's literally just any excuse to watch Emperor's New Groove. Like Kronk in that is just, I love him so much. He's like a puppy. Can have a whole podcast talking about that, but. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all your openness and honesty about all of those things. And, one's journey in life, even if one is close to God, it doesn't mean that it goes without hardship, and it doesn't mean without learning. And one of the perspectives that I really like, and one of the things taken from you speaking of your struggle, is that your faith in God helped you sort of hold on, and God did guide you in sort of ways to do it. But God will only give you, say, a helping hand to a degree. You still need to put the work in. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that in a bit more detail, sort of your relationship with God and how that has helped you, but also how you had to kind of help yourself as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a very misunderstood concept, not just with religious people, but, just in any capacity. Mm-hmm. Just even when I'm at church, sometimes when people make comments, I'm just like, that's not how it works. But basically, if you believe in any higher power whatsoever, like it just any kind of, even if it's just good energy versus bad energy, surrendering to that and realizing that there are things in this world you can't do. You can't. And unless you let it go and let that good energy or that higher power or God basically take the reins, if you believe in manifesting, it's like giving up trying so hard to make things happen and allowing them to come to you. Mm-hmm. And then just recognizing it when it shows up. Because there's, of course, counterfeits that sometimes will come your way and be like, oh, that will make me happy. Or maybe this will, but being able to learn how to recognize that's it. That's the thing. And being grateful for it. Even though when it shows up, like for me, I was not in a place to be grateful for the sickness I was experiencing at the time. I was mad. I did it anyway. It took tremendous willpower, but willpower will only take you so far. Every person who uses willpower will eventually use it up. And then you're lost. There's no more left. So being able to have that either person, like to me, I rely on a God, like he's my person, or energy that you don't understand. Just, I know there's something out there that is greater than me, and I am choosing to hold on to that there's something greater than myself, something that brings light and life into this world. And believing that whatever it is will help you, whether it's angels or God, or just energy, and receiving it. So for me, when I started eating the fish and I realized, holy cow, this is working, it felt like, and I know I've said this before, but it felt like for years, for the first 25, almost 30 years of my life, I was banging up against a wall. Like, I want to get through. It was too tall to climb. There's no ladders around. And even if I found one, it would break. It was just, there was no way over this wall. And it was hurting me every time I tried to hit up against it by myself because I needed a bulldozer. And the surrendering was like, I can't do it. Letting the bulldozer come break it down for me. And then all I had to do was step forward. So it's not like I had to just be like, I just give up and I don't want to do anything anymore. Like bulldozer comes and then I get to continue walking forward. Whereas it was hurting me before. Now the pain is gone. And that's what Christians can refer to as like the Christ's atonement, where he paid for our sins and our sorrows and our pains, where it's just the pain is gone. So I could then start doing other work. I could go back to my past in my mind and reconcile some of these things that had happened and do them over, but from a different perspective of love and kindness and forgiveness. And forgiveness, I think, is the key to everything. If you learn how to forgive, you've won. Like that is the trial of, or the one thing in life that I think is the hardest to learn, the hardest to give to yourself and to others. But it is the key to happiness. The faster you can let go of things and move on, the happier you will be, period. That goes for marriages. That goes for mistakes you make, embarrassments, past pains. I mean, people like to blame their past. Well, I was raped when I was 4 or 12. And I'm like, yeah, but you're 26. And it's like, you're still letting him rape you every single day because you were not letting it go. You really want to give him that much power? That person who raped you, he's still hurting you. Well, it's just how psychology. I'm like, bullcrap. Like, you can get over this. You can let it go, and it takes forgiveness. Is it easy? Can you just say, oh, well, yeah, I forgive? No, maybe not today, but you've got to start somewhere. It's you. It's you who's now hurting yourself. And so if you want to blame your past, blame your present, blame the people, you can. It's not going to do you any good. You're just throwing dark energy at yourself. Or letting them hurt you, whether it's someone you're married to or someone from your past. It doesn't matter. And so I think the blame game is our biggest problem in this psychology, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. Stop blaming. Just own what is right now and do what you can, and then let that higher power do the stuff you can't. So there are some things you can't change. If I can't change, for example, the fact that I married the first time, I have kids with someone that I share with now. I can't change that. I can't change the things that go on at his house, but I can pray for them. I can do things differently at my house, and I can teach them and uphold them and nurture them in that way. And then pray they learn from both of our bad examples to do it better. But sometimes you just have to wield that patience and then turn the rest over. Like, that's not in my control, but I can look to the light and ask whatever that light is to take care of that for me.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's kind of going with the ebb and flow of the world. And as someone who's not religious, I still believe, I still get feelings, and I still get these, I call it the pull. So it feels like something in my core is being pulled by something. And if I believed in a deity, it would be God pulling my soul, like gently guiding me in a certain direction. But it's, even though I'm not a religious individual, I can feel, there are times where something happens and I get a feeling before it happened. There's a really odd one, which a friend of ours, when they told us that they got pregnant, they called, because they were good friends of my partner, Megan, and they called Megan and spoke to her, and Megan was like, oh, that's really good. And I heard over the phone, and it's the worst feeling I've had in my life that's not like a physical pain. I had a gut punch really hard, and it was so weird. And I said to Megan, I was like, something's wrong. I was like, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but I was like, something seems wrong. It turned out that baby ended up having cancer, which is horrendous. But thank God, I'm saying this story because he's like 2 or 3 now. He's lovely. It's all gone, basically. He's still obviously occasionally getting checkups and things, but we see him occasionally. You could not tell. He's the happiest little boy ever, and he's great. But like, that was a weird thing. And then when Megan and I met, we met on a dating app, but when we did, she messaged me first, and I immediately got this feeling, and I was just like, something, I was already talking to someone who was, but then as soon as Megan messaged, I was like, I feel something, there's some sort of connection here. And, I've been with her for nearly 5 years, and we've got a dog and a house and all kinds of other stuff, and I'm hoping to spend my life with her as well. That's the goal. But it's like, there's certain times in my life where I've just had a good or a bad feeling. I get more good feelings than bad, to be fair. But sometimes, even with podcasting, it's really weird. I'll be like, oh, I haven't heard back from this person, which happens sometimes. And then I go, should I message them back or email them just to follow up? And there's a part of me that goes, no, maybe just don't. Maybe just put it off. And for a while, I was like, maybe that's me just being lazy. But anytime I get that feeling, every time the person will message like the next day or something like that. And it's just like, something I view as the universe, but who's to say that God isn't a combination of the consciousnesses throughout Earth and the universe, all kind of, each of it is a piece of God, and you put it all together and it forms the great consciousness of God, which is beyond human comprehension because we're a part of it. We are part of God because we're made from God, literally, as well as our minds and our souls. So there's all kinds of elements of it of religion that I find intriguing, and I do like to take lessons because I was raised, my parents weren't religious, but I went to a Catholic school for the first 6 or 7 years of my life, which did put me off Christianity and Catholicism for quite a while. It's been making my way back, but it's one of those interesting things that the ebb and the flow and just kind of going with like your gut is always something I always used to think is nonsense or intuition or things like that, but I hear, whether it's someone spiritual, religious, or anyone, it's just, there are some times where you just kind of know and you should kind of feel. And I think surrendering yourself and kind of, going back to your mind of when you decide to do something is blocking off all other options. And it's like, kind of, if you decide to allow things in, you do kind of take a step back. You let whatever needs to go past you, be it a bulldozer or whatever, go past you. I think that's so important for people to hear, because sometimes the best thing to do really is actually to take a step back. You've got a problem in front of you that you're tearing your hair out, you can't solve. Leave it till tomorrow and you'll probably have an answer. And I think that's a lot of where you're coming from kind of fits in with a lot of those ideologies.
Yeah. And being patient. I think before I was running in circles, using my energy and anger in just all the wrong ways. And you can use that same passion in a way that will move you forward instead of in a circle. But what you were saying about your gut, so true. And I think different people feel things in different ways. Like I feel it in the gut, the chest, like a warm feeling that goes whoosh, like right above my head. But I'll ask different people and they say, well, I feel it, this way. And some people will get like a really intense, and they'll only get it once and then not again. So it's really important they listen the first time because they won't get it again. Or their emotions. Like I know some emotionally inspired people who, if they're in the emotion of it, they can't make that decision or it's going to be the wrong one. Like they have to let the emotions go through. And that might take 5 minutes. It might take 5 days. It might take 5 months or 5 years, depending on what the decision is. But to just let those emotions ride the wave, and then you'll know. Like you'll know at the end. And if you practice kind of your authority, like what works for you, you can get really good at those yes and no's. Like I I ask myself yes and no questions all the time, or I'm asking God, but or asking for something. Like sometimes I'm like, I need a quarter. I need a quarter, and then I'll go around the corner and there's one on the floor. Or the other day I was painting outside. I needed to paint a post, and my mom came over to help me with the baby, and I was running out of time. I had to be an appointment, and she's like, "It's almost 3:00," and I'm going, I know. So I'm trying to finish this post, and I'm thinking, "Gosh, dang it! I forgot to bring a bag for my brush." And down the road, it's just like the wind's blowing a bag in my direction. I was just like, thank you. So put it in there, and I was able to go off on my way. But even things as silly as that I have just learned to be like so grateful for and laugh and be like, this is hilarious and life is so fun and interesting. It's not always fun and interesting, of course. Usually interesting, not always fun. But when you were talking about your friend where you felt that gut, like something's wrong, I had about 3 months. I during the COVID thing, I posted something that made someone really angry, and they decided to unfriend me forever. And I tried to reach out to them and was like, I'm really sorry. Like, I think you're a wonderful person. I didn't mean to offend you. And they never talked to me again. Like to this day, they were done. And it was around that time that I started getting this, like, I would lay down and I'd feel my throat closing up and weight on my chest. And I was like, what is this? And if it was the past, I would have maybe been freaking out, like, what's wrong with me, and having anxiety, and I need to go to the doctor, and but I asked one of my yes and no questions. I was like, is this something I need to go to the doctor for? And it was no. And I was like, it's energy. And I got yes. It's like, okay. So at first I thought it was this friend of mine. I was like, maybe he's just so mad and I need to get kind of work through this energy, pray for him, pray for me, just try to diffuse that. And I did that, and it wasn't very effective. And I was kind of confused because usually I could kind of get stuff like that to let up. And 3 months later, I was still having trouble. I even asked my husband to give me a blessing one time because I couldn't sleep. I felt like every time I was about to fall asleep, I would like stop breathing. And I was like, this is so weird. This is so weird. I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of scared. That next week, and it had been like 3 months by this time. And I was like, I hope I don't have to live with this forever. I saw on Facebook, because I've been avoiding it as of late because of so many people were so angry, and I was just like, yeah, I want to back off of that. But I saw that my friend, she's a singer, a beautiful singer, and she had for the past little while been sick, but she'd gotten to the point where she almost died. And it was something to do with like the vocal cords, the what do you call this, esophagus. Mm-hmm. And it was, she almost died because she couldn't breathe. And I realized that it was her. And as soon as I started praying for her and asking for comfort and release and just like some, whatever I thought maybe she would need, it went away and it never came back.
Wow.
It was crazy. And then I talked to her. She couldn't speak for a long time, so she'd text me. But about a year later, she finally called me and was like, oh, how are you doing? And I asked her how, and I was like, I felt you for like 3 months. It was killing me. And, I can only imagine what it was doing to you, because I was just feeling like probably the residual of whatever. It was like, hello, I need help. I need prayers. And I didn't know it was you until I figured out it was you. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, how did it feel? Like, what were you going through? And she said, Jen, I'm not kidding. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like someone was pouring acid down my throat, strangling me, and that I was drowning at the same time. Oof. And it was just awful. But just interesting that it took me a while to figure out what it was, but it was like my higher power was trying to tell me, this person needs you. This person needs you to pray for her. I know you can do it. Mm-hmm. And but I think that a lot of times people don't realize, especially people with tendencies towards, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack, and those like anxiety type things, they might just be feeling somebody else, and to just acknowledge that this might not be. And even if it is, like working through it as an observer, looking at it like, my heart is racing. I might have a heart attack. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I should go to the doctor. Maybe not. I don't know. I've been through this before. It usually calms down, and just observe it. Or maybe this is somebody who's going through something right now, who's scared or whatnot, and I'm just feeling them right now. It's not necessarily even me. So to just kind of keep that idea, open-mindedness here, this is probably really woo-woo for some people, but I found that to be accurate more times than not. Yeah. And just asking myself, who is this? Rather than freaking out.
Of course, it's one of those, and it's like whenever I have these conversations with people, I know I've got quite a wide berth of listeners. Some of them are more open and spiritual, and you say anything to them, they're like, "That sounds cool." And there's other ones who are more scientifically skeptic and things. And I like to, whenever we speak about spiritual things on the show, I always like to try and rationalize it in some way.
Mother and baby. I mean, if mothers and babies connect,
exactly,
like their heartbeats.
When people.
Or when you're singing with a group, their hearts start beating at the same time. So there's connection on so many scientific levels. Agreed.
Yeah, there's circadian rhythm. I think all living cells have this rhythm that connects with the sun and the earth and how things go, and it's like all kinds of crazy stuff. And I like when it comes to things like the feelings, it's like even if someone doesn't believe in a higher power, at the end of the day, if you bring it down to a scientific thing, is that we're all made from the same general matter. So if we're all made, then we're all connected, even if, even through the air, we're connected, it's one of those things. So I just look at it like in any way I try and rationalize it, it could still be possible because it's just, there are senses that there are things that humans can't sense. An example I always give of this is if you look at radiation or like a UV light, or you hear, you blow a dog whistle. We can't hear it, but we know that dogs can. So there's sounds we can't hear. There's things we can't see. And the amount of mystery and amazement there it must be in the universe, on this planet and things, and just things that we can't sense because, if you never had eyes or vision, you would never know that sight was a thing. If you never had ears and you never heard anything, you would never know sound was a thing. And it's things like that where it's like, there are things that humans are probably sensing that we don't even realize that we are sensing. And I think that things like that, even if it is God telling you, or if it is just your deep connection with this friend of yours going through, the air or whatever, or just deep connections with people. And as I said earlier, memories are just electric things in our brain. So it's like, well, and it's just energy. So it's like, well, who's to say energy can't be sent across wherever? Who's to say that your friend can't be in so much suffering that they're letting out almost ripples of pain through the stratosphere, and you just have like an internal antenna that's kind of tuning into it? And that's how, there's all kinds of things I always go, whenever people speak about these things, I'm always like, even if one tries to take it away from anything spiritual, which I'm not opposed to, I'm fine with that stuff, I like to always say to listeners, try and be open with it, because there are ways scientifically you can explain these elements. And I just think that the way, whenever you speak about it, you always speak about it in a very easy to understand way, a very open way, but you still talk about your personal experience, which is one thing that I've really drawn to you in your, in the many podcasts I've listened to you speaking on. I really like that way of you speaking. And even when you said about forgiveness and things and how important that is, I know that was a little while ago now, but that is so important, learning to forgive yourself. And as you said, like in relationships, how many relationships must there be that just fail because people can't forgive each other? If it's something tiny, and I just think there's so many words of wisdom that you have for so many different elements of the life you've lived. And I think that that's probably a telling of when you were going through this struggle and it was like, why is God putting me through these things? Why am I suffering? Now you're kind of at the other side. It's like, not to say use the term incorrectly, but it's almost like you're enlightened. It's almost like you've got you've gone through the struggle and now you're at the other side and you can kind of help people. So I just think it's amazing.
Well, hindsight's definitely 2020.
Yes.
When you're in it, it's muggy and, you feel like you're in like mud water and you can't see anything. But now, like I look back on my life, which was very messy, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for it, and I can appreciate it. And I've learned even to be especially grateful for the most difficult people in my life, like the people who caused me the most pain, because those are the people that gave me the opportunity to grow the most. Because I think even when I, won from a few years ago that at the time I was like, just why? Just stop, like, just leave me alone and on. And I was just asking these questions. I was like, why not you? Like, this is a gift. Like, this is forcing you to grow. You can either complain and cry and blame them and that they're not going to change. But if you want to be happy, you're going to have to change. And I'm like, okay. Whenever something hard happens or difficult people, it's like, why not you? Why not me? Like it's an opportunity, even though at the time, I want to throw a little tantrum, just I don't want to. But then you get through the other side. If you handle it well, if you don't handle it well, you usually keep getting that same lesson over and over again. It'll keep coming till you learn it. So learn quickly. It's my best advice, or at least, do that surrender thing where like, I can't do it. Will you take care of it so I can move on? That's valid too. And I think different people feel differently. And I think that any person who minimizes the way that someone feels, and I mean on an intuitive level, whether they receive intuition through their dreams or through their thoughts or through a way that they feel, through their gut, through their head, through a prick in their ear, like it could seem so silly, or through my, spiritual animal that comes and visits me. It doesn't matter what it is. But everybody feels so differently. And if it works for you and it's bringing joy into your life and putting you in the right directions, and I don't think God cares how you listen. I just think he wants you to listen because he wants you to be happy. So if you don't believe in him, he's like, cool, I don't care. Like, just take the bait. I'm like trying to help you here. Just take it. I love you. And if you're listening, it's awesome. It's not like, oh, I'm going to punish you if you're bad. I want to help you, and I want you to have joy and happiness, and I want you to become more divine and more enlightened, because when you're letting go of the things that are keeping you captive, whether that's an emotion or your past or drugs or whatever it is, whatever addiction it is. Some people are addicted to being angry or addicted to hating people. Like that's the thing that they resolve to, or they would just resort right to that thing. That's captivity. Like that's hell. Okay. And being free of all of that, to be able to actually make a choice versus operating on default or reaction, is hell versus heaven, in my opinion.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. And I like that when I was a teenager, I was quite anti-religion in general. I had some bad experiences and things, and then I kind of learned about some of the atrocities that has been caused in pretty much all religion, or as at least an excuse for all religion. Even today, people do horrible things and claim it's for a religious thing, even though the thing they're doing is going literally against all the teachings.
Terrible.
Exactly. So it's like, when I was younger, I was very anti all this sort of stuff. But then as I started looking into things a lot more, looking into various religions and things a lot more, I was just, there are certain interpretations that can be taken from a variety of things. I'm not here to focus on those elements because it could be a 20-hour podcast and still won't scratch the surface. But it's about, interpretation is a part of it. But I think that I like to try and be optimistic now. When I was a teenager, I wasn't. And then I went through, in 2 years, 3 members of my family passed away. My grandmother, my dad, and then my uncle, all for different things and all in different ways. And it was one of those times in my life that was, at the time I was a bit the kind of thing. It was just kind of like, why me? Why is, oh, grandma's just died. Oh, and now my dad's cancer's come back and now he's, dying, and all these things. And I was like, oh, finally, the death's gone. My uncle is now the sort of patriarch of the family. He's kind of taking over, and then he dies suddenly without any warning. And I'm just like, what?
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot to deal with. And I was like 18, 19. So it was just like, it was a lot to deal with in my sort of becoming an adult. But I've said on the podcast before, but like, that struggle has taught me more than anything. And in the struggle that happened there, everything that happened of my life because of that was A, such a learning experience, and B, such a perception change that once I kind of got out of the grieving period and the degree of sort of substances I was abusing because of it, once I got out of that and I kind of really took a while to be by myself and really go like, okay, how do I process this rather than just, basically just distracting myself? Well, how do I really process it? And after I'd got through that, one thing for me was really that whole idea of, if you put out good vibes, if you're just trying to be a happier person, if you try and help people, just friends, if they need a hand with moving, or someone needs to borrow £10 for the cinema or something, I'm really showing my age saying that. No one's have to borrow money from the cinema for years because you order online, but still, these kind of little things that people do, and just trying where you can to be happy, optimistic, and helpful. And I was like, it sounds like such a cliche, but since having that kind of life experience and changing my own perception, everything in my life has gotten better. All my relationships have gotten better. And I'm just generally happier. Like, I made the effort, as you say, you know, I made that decision myself to be like, I'm going to try and see the best in life, because I've seen basically the worst of it in a lot of ways, and I don't want other people to have my burdens on them. I don't want me to go into be involved in someone else's life and just make them miserable, like I've just had to experience from something that is no one's fault. So I want to try where I can to make other people happier. That change, everything is better. It's such a crazy thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, I love that.
I just think it's a lot of the things that you've been speaking about with your life, and I like how you've got that optimistic side of things, and I think you contribute a degree of that to your faith and what you take from that. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit more about, with your relationship with God, how your faith really helps you. I know you've delved into it a little bit, but just like, if you could, in your own words, if you could either define God or your connection with them, just some sort of thing that's personal to you with your connection with the divine. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been taught to pray my whole life, but I didn't actually learn how to pray until I actually got older. Like, actually making it not just about kneeling down and saying words that for asking for everything all of the time. I need this, I need that, please bless this. Now my prayers, unless if I'm hurting, I'll ask for release. You know, I'll ask for very specific things, not vague. Help me get out of this. No, how am I going to get out of this? Will you do this, or will you get rid of this feeling I'm having of anger? I don't like it. Will you take the hate I'm feeling for this person right now? I don't want to hate them. Those types of requests. But the rest of it, I kneel down and I give gratitude. So like a lot of people have gratitude journals. I don't like taking the time. It's hard for me to sit down and do writing. And so for me, I make that my prayer. I sit down and I tell him everything I'm grateful for. And it could be like the silliest things. Like, I'm grateful that, I almost dropped a bucket of water and I didn't today.
Bag blowing in the wind.
Thank you for that bag blowing in the wind, or, my children. I'm grateful for my son's health. I'm grateful that he didn't swallow anything today that we shouldn't have. I'm grateful for the joy he gives me. I'm grateful for this little fluffy keychain that I have. It makes me happy. And just going through the whole gamut, because in my mind, he created everything, and he created this perfect life for me. And perfect meaning it's not going to look perfect. But in the words of a friend of mine, when I was asking the why me, she described her life in a time when it was really messy. And then she had the words come to her mind. Oh, it's looking so good. It's turning out just perfectly. And she was like, like, what are you talking about? And he's no, this is turning out beautifully. And to her, she said, I was hearing God tell me this was like perfect, but that it really is. Like, that our lives, I love astrology because you can look at that chart and see how there's no other chart just like yours, not a single one of them. And you can see the connections and the ideas behind it, and Christians listening to this, if you are, I'm a Christian. I also love astrology because I think that there are clues there that can bring us closer to God. And looking at it just gives me more of a testimony that he's looking out for me, that like, I agreed to this. And that there's this perfect plan in place to have me experience all the things that Jennifer needed to learn to become somebody. And life is not about, let's see if we can make this really fun or really easy or have a lot of money. It's all like, the whole point of it is to learn stuff and become someone. So if you look at that with that perspective, regardless of how you feel about God or otherwise, it just makes everything so much more fun and have meaning. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. You can have the faith that there's a reason for this, and it's going to be okay. One of my favorite things that my husband's mother framed, and I have it hanging in our house, was, it'll be okay in the end. And if it's not the end.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So I think John Lennon said that, actually.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, genius, John Lennon. Words.
Spitting out facts. Well, it's amazing because, I mean, one of the things as well is something I've realised quite a lot is when I was younger, and I imagine you may have these moments as well, looking back when you were especially in your depression or when you were kind of in your formative years, which is, if we got everything we asked for, be it asking God or otherwise, we would destroy our entire lives. When I was a teenager, I wanted nothing more than to make a YouTube channel and become ridiculously famous. Looking back, I probably wouldn't be here right now if that happened to me, because I would not have coped with fame of the level I thought I wanted at that point. And there's loads of elements where I'm just like, no, I need this thing in my life. I just want it. I just deserve it. And then you look back and go, if I got that, I wouldn't have been happy. I'd have been miserable. So I wondered if you can attest to that kind of idea of just, you don't always know what you need. You know what you want, but what you want is rarely what you actually need, in air quotes.
Oh, for sure. When I was younger, I spent all my time trying to prove that I had worth through doing things, accomplishing things, being somebody, being good at stuff. And I was good at a lot of stuff. And I got scholarships, and I was a really good athlete and a really great musician, and none of it mattered. Like, it didn't help it helped me with experiences, but it didn't help me improve my view of myself one little bit. You take any of those things away, I had a bad performance. My boyfriend dumped me. Or if I did poorly in a race, suddenly my identity was destroyed. Like, I was worthless. So my worth was tied to these things that ultimately don't give a person any worth. They're just things you do, and they're character building, but they shouldn't define you. I held on to them for dear life because it's all I had. I didn't know what else to do. And I'm glad I did them. But if I could go back, would I do all that stuff and kill myself trying to, be the best at everything? No, certainly not. I would have enjoyed life more. I would have focused more on connections and just not been terrified every time I had a race or a performance because I was afraid of failing. And I'm still working through some of that fear of failure. That's still a thing. I still find myself subconsciously avoiding different things because I'm like, oh shoot, I'm afraid I'm going to fail at that. That's why I'm avoiding doing it, or that's why I keep finding things to do so I don't have to do this. And then I'll be like, gosh dang it, you're doing it. I've learned if something terrifies me, I do it. Mm-hmm. I recently got suckered into, I didn't realize what I was doing. But long story short, I got suckered into doing a thing where people have to vote for you online. And I was like, oh, I'm already humiliated. Oh gosh, I don't want to do this, but I'd already committed to it. So I did it, and I made a video, and I asked people to vote for me, and that was hard. But instead of being humiliated, I was just like, this is a learning experience. I get to put myself out on a limb where I'm so not comfortable and just ride this wave. And it's cool. It's cool that I don't get a lot of votes. It's fine. I got 150, but other people can get thousands. I'm not at that point. So, and it's totally fine. So I just treated it like an exercise. I'm doing it. I said, yes, I'm going to go through with it, and it's going to be okay. And then at the end of the day, I learned something from it.
Yeah. And a lot of the time when you do something and you think you know what the goal is, the actual thing you achieve from it is something completely different. Like with me, with podcasting, it was something I've always had some sort of creative outlet since college and things. And so what podcasting, I was like, yeah, I'll do that. It'd be good to talk with my friends, get have these important conversations and things, because a lot of the time I was trying to have them on a Friday night where me and my friends would hang out and play board games, and people are like, I don't want to talk about existential crises while playing Monopoly. That's not really, I just want to chill out. I've had a busy week. I don't want to delve into all that. A couple of my other friends were like, yeah, I want to delve into that, and the rest of them were like, no, we can't talk about that for 3 hours, or listen to you two talk about it for 3 hours, which what would happen. And so when I launched the podcast, I was like, that's what I'm going to get out of it. What actually happened is I've just been connected to so many incredible people, such as yourself, of just these amazing conversations I wouldn't have had if I didn't have the podcast. And the reason I started it isn't what I'm getting out of it. So whenever I think of, one of the things I want to teach my kids is if you want something, try and go for it. But just know that the thing that you think you really want isn't always actually what's going to give you what you think.
Yeah. And because I got so many things that I wanted. And realized it really wasn't what I wanted. No. So, after the fact. So being very careful what you wish for is another thing I've learned.
Yeah.
But on the something that occurred to me, and I don't know if this fits into what we're saying right now, but just maybe backtrack a little bit. The Heart Math Institute, they're science-based, and they have been able to do so many different science experiments based on the energy that the heart puts out. And one of the things that they've been able to measure somehow was that even if you're just, because I had a friend who was super, super, super sick, and she was in a bed for like a year, like she couldn't really do anything, and she felt like a burden. And she felt, very, very sad in that respect, because she's such a giver. Like she didn't want to constantly be doted on, and she didn't feel like she was worth much at the time. Just like, oh, like I'm just a waste of space. And I told her, according to this science, you can literally sit on a couch or in a bed feeling grateful, and that will put out more energy and basically dissipate all the negative energy that's within miles around you. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to talk to a single soul, and you are making a difference. You just have to exist. You just exist in a state of, I'm okay. I'm grateful for this bed. I'm grateful I'm not dead yet. Like that could be, as good as it gets that day. But when you do that, gratitude has one of the highest vibrations there are. They can measure it. Versus shame, which is one of, I think, the greatest pitfalls of religion is shame. And it's a totally misunderstood concept that you should have to feel shame to repent, or that you should have to feel shame to be a good person. Shame is one of the worst emotions out there. Like you get out of that as fast as you can. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to say, I wish I hadn't done that. But when you start falling into shame, it's just ugly. But that the feeling of gratitude or enlightenment in any way, just existing in that state can diffuse all of that. And it's so much more powerful than any negative emotion there is. So if you had 10 people in a room and they were all grumpy, and one person was like, I'm not going to give into this. I'm going to feel okay. I'm going to be grateful that I'm not grumpy today. Then that has the power to diffuse that much or more. Possibly, I can't quote the science experiment or what it actually said in terms of numbers, but it was significant.
I'll make a note of that. So did you say it was Heart, was it Math, sorry?
Heart Math Institute.
No worries. I'll put details for that in the show notes. I'll try and see the study and things. But yeah, that sounds incredible. I'm going to look into that after a conversation. I love it when you get those sort of like good news. Like a good news story. It's like, that's just a thing that brings a smile to your face. Just like, it lets out good energy and it's measurable. It's like, that's great. Who doesn't want to hear that amazing thing? And I want to ask as well, with basically everything that's been going on in your life and all these sort of other elements, obviously music is a big part of that. Music has been a part of that because I think, I wouldn't say specifically, but music in your family has been quite a big part for your entire life, really. Where did that sort of come from? Has your family always been musical, or was it your older sibling? Like, I'm just very intrigued because I personally, I love music, and I don't really play much. I played keyboard when I was younger, but my brothers are in bands and friends of mine and stuff, and I just like music. I just love in so many different facets. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that. I do want to remind myself. I'm going to say it out loud. I want to ask you how you got into astrology as well, because I am intrigued by that, especially with a religious background. It's not the most common thing, so I do want to ask that. But before we delve into that, music, how did that kind of encompass sort of your family and things? Obviously, so many of your siblings play instruments.
Well, it's kind of family oriented as far as ancestry goes, just in our grandparents. So my dad's mom was constantly writing poetry, but they would be like a poem she sent us for our birthday, catered to us. Like every year we'd get a poem, or if I needed to memorize a poem for school, she'd write me one I could memorize. And she wrote hundreds of songs, which I actually just finished. Her dying wish was to have her music preserved. So I spent about 10 years, because it took me that long, of just picking away at it, because there was a lot of music. But I digitized it all and I put it online so that anybody can buy it for $1.
Oh, wow.
But she was very musical. She'd make my dad and his siblings go sing for people, or teach them songs to sing in church, and it was not an option. And he didn't grow up being amazingly musical. He did own a trumpet that he played until he got braces, and then he stopped, but he kept the trumpet, and that's the one I started on because it was the only one we had. We didn't have any money for instruments, but here's one you can play. And I thought the trumpet was amazing because it always gets to sit in the back of the orchestra where no one can see you, but you still get to play really loud. So I liked that idea that I wouldn't necessarily be front and center, but that I could make beautiful music and just like scream all of that passion out that I had for so many years. But So there's so much about music that I love, but my mother was raised by an alcoholic environment. So both of her parents drank, and she always felt like she didn't get to do the things she'd always wanted to do as a child. And then she grew up and she didn't have any talents, according to her. So she'd always wanted to dance, and she'd always wanted to play the piano, and she always wanted a pony. And they just weren't aware of her needs because they were drinking so much. And so she chose not to go that course. And she kind of, I almost want to say, went the total extreme opposite direction. But I think for us, it worked, where she was like, as soon as we expressed interest, she was on it. And I kind of treat my kids like that because I had a mother like her, where I'm like, oh, you want that? You like that? And it's not like, oh, you want video games? Sure, I'll buy that for you. It's, if they want an opportunity, I will make sure they get it. And if they're willing to work for it. And that was the case for us. So as soon as I expressed an interest, I want to play an instrument. We found a way to make that happen. As soon as Lindsey wanted to play violin, my sister, she found a way to make that happen, even though they had no money at the time. So, and it was like barter, trade, and steal. Let's see how we can make this work. She started on a cardboard box, like with a teacher who cost $15, you know, but like that was the start. And Brooke, she started on cello down the road once my dad got a job that was more consistent, and she could afford lessons for that too. But it was always, my dad was always playing classical music. You said Emperor's New Groove is one of the least, or the most, less used or unappreciated. I think Borodin is one of the most unappreciated classical artists out there. Polvetzian dances was my favorite as a kid, and Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. And you could ask my sisters the same thing. They would probably tell you the same thing too. We loved it. And Christmas time was like getting those records out, the Christmas records, and playing those. We were the last family on the block to get a CD player. We were always doing the records. And I think it just, music has the power, and I think that's why I felt so gravitated to it, is because you can kind of lose yourself, and it's a vibration. When you play notes, it vibrates literally, so it can kind of be very nurturing and healing in the moment that you're mastering that sound. Now, mastering the sound takes some time. You can appreciate the masters while you're learning. But actually being part of that, as an adult, I'm not what I would consider like a professional musician. I play Easter Sunday sometimes. We'll get paid to do that. And I play in a professional orchestra that doesn't get paid. We do volunteer. So I don't earn a lot of money doing it. I teach lessons. But that twice a year that I play with that orchestra and choir, it's 1,000-piece orchestra and a 1,000-piece choir and a full orchestra. And I get to sit smack dab in the middle, because that's where the trumpet sits, right in front of the choir and behind the whole orchestra. And it is the most amazing surround sound you can possibly imagine. It just doesn't get better than that. And I mean, it's a powerful feeling to just have your whole body be vibrating like that. That's why I do it. And just for the love of it. And I think that when you lose yourself in that purpose, it doesn't matter if you're making money. It doesn't matter if you are a professional or not. It's just, is it bringing you that joy and that journey? Because it's really taken us all on a journey that we wouldn't have gone on otherwise. I can definitely say that. I majored in it in college. So.
It's one funny thing I heard on one of the other podcasts you did. I heard when you were speaking about you and your sisters, you've obviously got Lindsey on the violin and then Brooke on the cello and yourself on trumpet, and you were like, it was kind of like, yeah, we tried, but the three instruments put together, they don't really make that amazing sound. You kind of need a bit more or a bit less. Just those three put together, it doesn't really work. So I loved that little anecdote. And I'd heard when you were speaking about sort of, when the podcast was asking you about Lindsey and her career and things, and you were speaking about, sheet music and that sort of stuff, that comment, it just cracked me up. So I just wanted to bring that up to you to say how much joy I got from hearing that. And just, I could imagine three young women just think, oh, we're going to sound great. And then all playing and being like, this doesn't really work.
We did do it for a talent show once, but it was goofy. It was to just be funny. And yeah. And I have actually used it on some recordings. Like I do the karaoke tracks. I work with a guy who's a producer. He actually lives in Mexico, and he sends me the track and I give him feedback, like fix this or make this louder or softer or whatever. I don't really like this instrument here. Can you replace it with something else? And we needed her recent album was a Christmas album, and it incorporated some singing. And he asked if I'd do the singing on it. And at first my gut went, oh, like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, you're scared. You're doing it. And so I have a little recording studio, very, very small. Bought it for my son because he's actually a good singer. I can like carry a tune, but I wouldn't call myself amazing or anything. But I do have my voice sounds like Lindsey's. So I was able to do the vocals for these karaoke tracks and send them to him, and he was able to make them sound decent, And so, even being able to do that, just silly things that you never would have thought. I don't sing, but I did it for the karaoke tracks. That was kind of fun.
That's amazing. And it's one other little funny anecdote I remember hearing was regarding your two sons, which was like, I think it was one of your sons, I think it was the eldest, was, as you say, like really good at singing, very musical, that sort of thing. And then your second son, you were just like, he tried singing and you're like, where did this come from? That's not good. Yeah. You are going to do sport. Into sport you go.
He does. He doesn't like to sing that much because I think he's embarrassed because I made the point that, gosh, like the first time you sang, it was terrible. And I think it embarrassed him. I feel bad. But so he's kind of self-conscious about it, even though he can sing now. But yeah, he's all about sports. And my other son is all about like the flow. Like he just wants to dabble in everything, and he wants to act, and then he wants to play, and then he wants to do music. And he's just a free spirit. And I love how different they are. Like, and I think putting anybody in a box and saying, this is how you should be, this is how you should do school. This is it. And I think that's the biggest problem with schools these days is it's one thing fits all. Let's push you all through math, science. It's like, well, how much are you actually using this? AI is going to be taking all those jobs. Nobody's going to care if you can do math. Nobody, because a computer can do it. And it's just like, is this what we're really valuing here? Like, how about we work on the heart and the kindness and empathy and storytelling, all the things that make us human. And or playing a sport, being physical and connection. Those are the things that are going to matter. The world is changing fast. So I think that the old model of school is grossly outdated. Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful for the options we have. Like I live in a state where homeschooling is an option. My older kids go to public school. They've loved it. My baby, I'm planning to homeschool him. So, different experience there. Never done it. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll smash it. I mean, it's not like, I think when people hear homeschooling a lot of the time, they kind of go, ooh, and they just think they would first imagine somebody an incredibly uneducated individual who doesn't know what they're talking about, teaching their children uneducated things. But even from like, not to say that I am a judge on anyone's educational intellect and things, but like you've got a major in music and things. You are committed. You try really hard. All these sort of elements of things, and every element of your life that you've spoken about, you've learnt from. And I think that all of those elements are just basically, if you want to be a good teacher, be it in a professional setting or in a homeschool setting, it's basically just be able to admit when you're wrong, being able to, having that thirst for knowledge, I think is quite important, wanting to learn, not just teaching someone because you have to. Yep, you've got to learn about this. Being like, I want you to learn this. This is such an interesting thing. And I think if you have those two elements, just the thirst for knowledge and the willingness to accept when you are wrong, those two elements, you can take yourself so far with those two things. So I think with you homeschooling, it would be incredible. I wish you'd homeschooled me because I did not have a great school experience, and a lot of it was one size fits all. I did okay academically when it came to maths and stuff, or as you guys call it, math. But it's one of those things where I've got friends of mine, a good friend of mine called Alex who's been on the podcast a couple of times. He is so intelligent. I'd probably wager he's smarter than I am. You go into the woods, he can tell you every plant. He hears a bird call and he can tell you what it is. He knows all the native birds. All across the world. He's insane. But at school, because he couldn't do it in the way that they kind of put it, he was in one of the lower sets. And it was like, that knocked his confidence because he was like, I thought I was smart. Clearly, I'm an idiot because the education system's putting this on me. And for a while, it did take him a long time. But through that struggle, he now works with a lot of kids who are either troubled kids, the ones who they go to certain schools and it's like they have to have very specific kind of care for them before they'd potentially go to the equivalent of like a juvenile hall. And he always connects with kids like that, the air quotes difficult ones, the ones who are unruly. He always connects with those because he kind of knows where they're coming from in a lot of ways. And I agree. I think the school system, both in the UK, the US, and most of the Western world, it's not built for everyone. It's built for like it's a portion of people, and they go, this will be enough. Off you go. So completely agree with you there. But linking with that, actually, I want to ask, because we'll start to wrap up here, because we've been chatting for an hour. I could chat for another hour easy, but we'll start to wrap up. But I do want to ask about your astrology and things. So obviously we touched upon it earlier. How did you get into it? Where did you, obviously everyone vaguely knows a bit about astrology, kind of connecting with the stars and star signs and that, but that's just like surface level stuff from what I understand from some of my friends who are a bit more into it, I think more in line with yourself. So how did you get into it really? I'd love to know.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by it because when I would read certain things, I'm like, ooh, that's pretty accurate, like for my personality, with the sun. What I didn't realize is all of the other stuff. I for years I would kind of dabble in it or check it out, but there's definitely kind of a dark side to it that I sensed, and I was just like, just didn't feel like it was the right person, the right time, and so forth. And then a friend of a friend came across this lady who is teaching light-filled astrology. She calls it illuxology now. She coined the term. Illuminate. Lux is like the sun. And light. And as soon as I found her, I was like, this feels good. Like this feels authentic. It feels like something I want to learn. And so at that point, I found my mentor. I took her class. I now use it in my sessions my goal is to work with, and I've started doing this, but working with people who want to overcome depression, who are like, I'm ready to do that, or at least consider the possibility that it's possible. Will you help me? And I'm like, yes. I have all kinds of tools, pages of them that I, just itemize because I've tried so many things just to see if it would help, And with the astrology, I can kind of look at somebody's chart and kind of see how they tick before I even meet with them to kind of know what not to say, what maybe to say, or what will help them the most without even having talked to them yet. Whereas a lot of times you find that you spend the first session being like, who are you? Like almost like trying to figure out who this person is so you can help them. And it just gives me that jump start. It doesn't mean everything I'm internalizing or assuming is correct, because it really is just a weather map. And that's how I look at it. It's like, I consider weathermen astrologers. Like they'll look at what's going on in space, in the weather, in the clouds, whatever, and they'll deduce based on what I'm seeing. It's probably going to rain today, and people are probably not going to go outside in a swimsuit. I mean, it's just a deduction, right? But there's no for sure. It's just, here's what it might feel like. Here's the energy. And based on your agency, what are you going to do with that agency? And you could, do like end up way over here because you made these choices, or you could end up way over here because you made these choices. You'd be stuck right here because you made those choices. But two people could have the exact same chart. It doesn't exist. But if they did, they could become two totally different people, but based on their response to that similar energy, like twins. Like twins are very often like polar opposites. So, but I loved her focus on the fact that God was the center of the universe, and that he made the stars, and that everything revolved around him, basically that he's the one who created it, and that it says something about us. When we're born, they're in a very specific place. Scientifically, they have been able to show that the position of the planets and their pole, their magnetism, does create different, does affect human behavior in a way. Like that'll make people either more grouchy or feeling more ease or sleepier or these different things. So there is an actual scientific basis for some of the astrology, which they actually call it a science back when Christ was born, if you believe in the Christmas story and the Magi. People like to say, oh, well, they were astronomers. And I'm going, guys, like nobody looks at the stars as an astronomer and says, I think a king of God was born and that he was born right here. Like nobody does that. If they're an astronomer, nobody. It's the astrologers who do that. And I did a little digging and found that people back then, they were both. If you were an astronomer, you were an astrologer too. And they were very closely linked together. It was considered a science. And you could take, for example, if you knew where and when I was born, or like, for example, in Christ's case, if you knew when King David was born and where he was born, they probably had his star chart. I can't prove that biblically, but I believe David was an astrologer. And if you knew that, and you knew that something is going off crazy right now in the sky, and there's this new star and all of these other things, it seems to be saying something big is happening, and wow, could this be the Christ? And then to go back and use math to figure out who David's parents were. Like if you worked both directions, you could figure out where it was, like where this person's supposed to be born and when. Like it's just scientifically, mathematically possible. So that's kind of where I was like, there's something to this. I don't think man has all the answers, but I think it's really cool. And it's kind of fun it's been helpful for me in understanding my kids better, what their needs are, because they are not me. They're not like me. And to be able to look at their chart and be like, oh gosh, this is kind of suggesting that his mother isn't connecting in an emotional way that he needs. Maybe I should work on that, and that maybe his greatest need is to be acknowledged, or that my other son's need is differentiation, these different things that can kind of give you a clue so that you're like, okay, like my way of parenting isn't really meeting this need. So maybe I need to cater it a little more to him. Or with your other relationships, your spouse, my mother, I really struggled with my relationship with my mom. And when I compared our two charts, oh my goodness, like I felt so much compassion for my mom because I could see how my chart was triggering her in just like all these different ways. And I was like, oh, poor mommy, whereas before I was like, my mom doesn't meet my needs. And, just like that resentment that I had for my mom. I think a lot of people have mommy issues where they're like, well, they did the best they could. They really did, no matter who it was. I don't think any person grows up thinking, I want to mess up my kid. They all want to do good for their kids. And sometimes that passion turns into destructive behaviors that hurt your children because you're trying so hard, or that you think they need this and they actually need that. And to be able to see that, it actually was really healing for our relationship. So just being able to kind of get it and get the psychology part is what I love of the astrology, and the relationships and how you tick and what might help you move forward and all of those kinds of things.
That's what I love, listening to you speak about these elements, both with your relationship with God and also with the astrology and other elements of your life, is kind of like you view all of them as not to reduce your relationship with God, but like tools in a tool belt, in a sense of there's an issue. Okay, here's the issue. Let's try and use, okay, well, God is a magnifying glass, and then, astrology is like the opposite of a magnifying glass. This metaphor is being terrible. But how about measuring tape? There you go. Measuring tape is astrology. God is a magnifying glass. Said it right here, folks. But like these ideas where I think you showcase some of, at least in my view, some of the best elements of astrology and a religious individual, because I think some of the issues that come from astrology and spirituality or religion is when people are like, no, I've got the answers. It is this, indisputably. If you don't believe me, you're wrong. And you're kind of like, I think God is guiding me this way. I'm going to go with what I think he's telling me. I think that with astrology, it seems to be like at least hinting or pushing towards this direction. I'm just going to assume that's correct in this scenario. Let's go with it. And then if it isn't correct, I'll learn from it. Using kind of guiding hands. And that's one of the ideas I love about the idea of God. And that's why I think when one pushes too hard on the literal God, in a sense of everything is God's plan, and every tiny little thing that happens in the entire universe, it was God's choosing for a specific reason that you can't comprehend. And if people believe that, that's completely fine. But for me, I'm more like, I like the idea of a creator who's created and then is trying to help. But it's like, just like when you birth children, when we've got our puppy, I didn't birth it, not possible. But when we got the pup into the house, we were just like, right, let's try and do everything we can to have this pup not hurt itself. We put it, we're crate training it. We made sure the lounge was dog proof to a degree. That we made sure there's not chocolate on the floor anymore anywhere. Not that we really left chocolate on the floor, but we made extra sure not to now. And it's just things like, we've created this thing and we can guide it and teach it, but we can't actually control it. We can't literally force our dog to do anything. And I quite like that idea of, at least how I'm interpreting it, is just like, you like the guide. The human experience is your own. And however you live, you can just take help from wherever, whether it's peers or whether it's spirituality or God or whether it's astrology or a combination of things. And you're just like, I don't know everything. I'm trying my best, But anyone who's willing to guide with, without malicious intent, when just these things, these signs, these feelings, and I've tried doing it this way and it seems to keep working. So I'm going to keep trying to do that. I just want you to know that I really appreciate, like, not that you need me to validate you, but I just think I really appreciate the way you go about using religion for all of its best ways and astrology. So I just want you to know, as someone who doesn't necessarily believe in those elements, that I really, really appreciate it. And I wish more people in this world followed God in a similar way that you do. I think that you've actually hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. And I couldn't have said it better. That was beautiful, honestly. And the funny thing is, when I was depressed, I was brought up religiously. I misunderstood so many facets and themes of what I was being taught, that I was that person. I was that judgy, like, you do it this way and that's the only way. Boy, was I miserable. I mean, that is not the truth. Like, I think people get stuck on the black and whiteness of things, and that, God is black and white. And I mean, kind of, maybe a bit. Really, what you said, this is not God imposing life on every creature. This was, I believe, something we signed up for. Mm-hmm. We're like, I want that experience. And he's like, cool, I'll provide it for you. And it'll be like, and then we get all these experiences like a game board. And he puts us down here and he's like, yay, you go. And then he expects us to like make choices and use our agency. And I think the opposite of that is control. Like, that is not the God that I have realized exists, or the energy that brings joy. It's all about agency. In fact, I won't even use the word should anymore. I use the word can. I don't use the word can't. I use the word could. Like, if you replace the word could with should, it's a totally different energy. It goes from shame to opportunity. And that's really what this world is all about. It's using your agency, learning how to find joy, have joy. We're not supposed to suffer till we die. That is a truth. I can't emphasize that enough. There is no God out there who would be like sentencing this person to misery for the rest of their life because they've struggled with a mental disorder. Like, you were meant to struggle with this so you could overcome it and then start helping other people. And I know a lot of people who don't, but ultimately it is a choice. When I decided, that's when things started changing, and it looks so different for every person. So I can't say that, oh, well, it's going to be easy peasy. I mean, it was a difficult road, but boy, was it worth it. And you just kind of have to be brave enough to believe that it's possible, because I think a lot of people are afraid to believe in that possibility, because what if they're disappointed, or, all these things? Well, I mean, just have the faith that anything is possible and that your road is not going to look like mine, and that's totally cool. That it's not supposed to, but to just start moving forward. And when you do, like, you buy a puppy, or you make that choice, or you look at your star chart and you're like, I think this is saying this. And you start moving forward. If it feels wrong, stop and be like, okay, maybe this isn't the right thing. Like, something's trying to tell me not to go any further. And if it feels good, then that's the green light. Keep going.
Amazing. I completely agree. It's one of those. So we'll wrap up here. Before I press stop on the recording or anything like that, please, I'll put details in the show notes. There's lots of things that you've mentioned here. The Heart Math Institute. I've also your grandmother's music as well. I'll get you if you're willing to send me a link, and I'll put that in the show notes. I'd love to. It's only $1. I would love to buy that and listen to some of your grandma's music. That sounds amazing. And then I've also noted the classical music as well. It was. Did you say Borodin? Sorry.
Yes, Bordin.
Oh, wonderful. That's how I spelt it. Wonderful. Absolutely fantastic. So I'll put details of those things in the show notes for everyone. But before we wrap up here, just tell everyone where they can find you, your website, any sort of other things you want to plug before we finish recording.
Yeah. My website is imaquarius.com. My socials on Facebook and Instagram are right there. I'm Aquarius Jen. And I do offer sessions on my website. If people want to sign up to do a session with me, it could be just chatting about issues you're having, or we could look at your star chart. So it's different for everybody. So it's been a lot of fun. And I'm so glad you asked me to come talk to you today. It's been a joy. Thank you so much.
No worries. It's been a joy speaking with you. Whenever I speak to someone with such positive energy, such as yourself, it always gives me a spring in my step as well. So just thank you for letting out positive vibes and things. And if people, I'll put a tiny little thing, because I didn't want the overshadowing of this conversation to be, your sister is Lindsey Stirling. a famous violinist, to be honest, my favorite violinist in the world. And I love the instrument of the violin. So being able to connect with you, like, I want to mention that just because people are going, she keeps referencing her sister and Lindsey and violins. It's like, is it? Yes, it is that person that you're thinking of, friends. And I'll put a link in the description as well to a bit of Lindsey's music. But, you know, I really want this conversation to be about yourself. And I really found that, you know, speaking with someone like you, it's just so valuable, I think, for listeners to be able to hear the positivity and the perspective, but also just to really feel it, to really feel your enthusiasm and your positivity, knowing that you've been through so much hardship. So all the links will be in the description. And just once again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much.